Hi, I'm Olivia. My grandmother's final words changed everything. You're not who you think you are. They switched you at birth. As she slipped away, she pressed a locket into my palm and whispered, "Find them." 3 months later, I stood, face to face with my biological family, only to uncover a secret so dark it made the hospital switch seem merciful. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The monitor beeped steadily beside my grandmother's hospital bed, a mechanical heartbeat that seemed more alive than her frail body beneath the thin blankets. I sat in the stiff vinyl chair, my fingers interlaced with hers, watching her chest rise and fall in shallow, labored breaths. The room smelled of antiseptic and dying flowers, a bouquet my mother had brought 3 days ago but hadn't returned to replace. "Livvy," Grandma Eleanor whispered, her voice cracking like autumn leaves. Her eyes, clouded with cataracts, but still that distinctive Palmer family green, fixed on me with sudden clarity. "There's something I need to tell you before I go." I leaned closer, brushing a strand of silver hair from her forehead. "I'm here, Grandma. What is it?" She gripped my hand with surprising strength. "The box in my closet, behind the photo albums. Get it now." I hesitated, not wanting to leave her side, but the urgency in her voice propelled me to my feet. "I'll be right back." I squeezed her hand and hurried out to find a nurse who could stay with her. 20 minutes later, I returned clutching a small wooden box I'd never seen before. It was simple oak with brass hinges, no lock, just a delicate carved rose on the lid. Grandma Eleanor's eyes fluttered open as I sat back down. "Open it," she commanded, her breathing more labored now. Inside was a hospital bracelet, yellowed with age, and a locket on a thin gold chain. I lifted the bracelet first, examining the faded type, Baby Girl Davison, 7 Libs 2Os, May 17th, 1991. "I don't understand," I said. "This isn't my birthday, and Davison isn't our name." Grandma Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Because you're not a Palmer, Olivia. You never were." The air seemed to vanish from the room. "What are you talking about?" "You were switched." "At birth," she whispered. "It wasn't an accident." My hands began to tremble. "That's impossible. You're confused, Grandma. The medication—" "I've kept this secret for 28 years, she interrupted, her voice suddenly stronger. "Your mother, Karen, she had a baby at St. Michael's Hospital the same night as another woman. Somehow, the babies were switched." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for her to smile and say she was confused, but her eyes remained clear and certain. "Your mother never knew. No one did except me." She paused, struggling for breath. "I was there that night. I saw the nurse make the switch." "You saw someone switch me, and you never said anything?" Disbelief sharpened my voice. "For 28 years?" "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered. "Karen had just lost your father in that accident. She was alone, devastated. When I realized what happened, I couldn't take you away from her, too." The monitor beeped faster, matching my own racing heart. "So who am I? Who are my real parents?" "The locket." She gestured weakly. "Open it." With trembling fingers, I pried open the small gold heart. Inside was a tiny photograph of a young couple, smiling, arms around each other. The woman had my exact smile, the same dimple on her left cheek. The man had my eyes, not Palmer green, but dark brown, almost black. "Catherine and James Davison," Grandma whispered. "They had a daughter the same night. They took home a Palmer. Instead." The world seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the edge of the bed to steady myself. "Where are they? Are they still alive?" "James died 5 years ago. Cancer." Her breathing grew more labored. "Catherine lives in Mapleton, about 3 hours north." "And what about—" I couldn't finish the question. What about their daughter, the girl who should have been me? Emily, Grandma said, reading my thoughts. Her name is Emily Palmer. She lives with Catherine now. Emily Palmer, my name, my life. Why tell me now? I asked, my voice barely audible. After all this time? Grandma Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Because I'm dying, and I can't take this to my grave. You deserve to know who you are. She squeezed my hand. And because there's more, Olivia. Something worse. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The monitor's beeping accelerated. What? What else could there possibly be? The switch, it wasn't an accident. Her voice dropped so low I had to lean in to hear, hers, someone paid for it to happen, find out why, find your family. Before I could ask anything else, the monitor shrieked. Grandma's hand went limp in mine. The door burst open as nurses rushed in, pushing me aside. I stood frozen, clutching the locket and hospital bracelet, watching as they tried to revive her. But I knew she was gone. She'd held on just long enough to shatter the foundation of my life with 6 words. You were switched at birth. Find them. I don't remember much of the next few days. My mother's grief was overwhelming, all-consuming. She clung to me at the funeral, her only daughter, her only family left. I stood beside her in numb silence, the weight of Grandma Eleanor's secret burning a hole in my pocket where I'd tucked the locket. How could I tell her? How could I explain that the woman we were burying had kept this devastating truth from us both? That I wasn't her daughter at all? I couldn't. Not yet. Not while she wept over the polished mahogany casket, clutching my hand like it was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. So I said nothing. I helped arrange the flowers, accepted condolences from distant relatives and neighborhood friends, served coffee and store-bought cookies in our living room afterward. I smiled and nodded, and pretended my entire world hadn't just been turned inside out. That night, after everyone had gone and Mom had finally fallen asleep with the help of a prescribed sedative, I sat cross-legged on my childhood bedroom floor and emptied the wooden box. Besides the bracelet and locket, there were newspaper clippings from May 1991 announcing the births at St. Michael's Hospital, a folded map with Mapleton circled in red ink, and a sealed envelope with my name, my given name, written in Grandma's shaky handwriting, Olivia Davison. I tore it open and unfolded a single sheet of paper. My dearest Olivia, if you're reading. I've finally found the courage to tell you the truth, though too late for you to ask all the questions you must have. I'm sorry for that cowardice. What I did was unforgivable. I convinced myself it was to protect Karen, to protect you, but the truth is, I was protecting myself. The Davisons were good people who had their child stolen. You were stolen. And I let it happen. The nurse who made the switch was Marlene Winters. She doesn't work at St. Michael's anymore, but last I heard, she opened a bakery on Elm Street in Greenburgh. She knows more than I do about why this happened. Find Catherine Davison. Find Emily Palmer. Discover who you truly are. But be careful. There are those who never wanted this truth revealed. I've loved you every day of your life, even knowing you weren't my flesh and blood. In my heart, you've always been my Livvy. With deepest regret and endless love, Grandma. Eleanor, I read the letter 3 times, my hands shaking worse with each pass. Questions crowded my mind, pressing against my skull until it ached. Who would pay to switch babies? Why? What possible motive could there be? And the biggest question of all, what would I do now? I glanced at the clock, 3:24 a.m. Too late to make any decisions. Too late to do anything but sit in the wreckage of what I'd thought was my life and try to breathe. I tucked everything back into the wooden box, slid it under my bed, and lay down, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars my father had stuck to my ceiling when I was 7. Stars that a man who wasn't my father had placed there for a daughter, who wasn't his. Sleep never came. By dawn, I had made my decision. I would find Catherine Davison. I would find Emily Palmer, the woman living my life while I lived hers. I would uncover the truth Grandma Eleanor had taken to her grave. But first, I had to tell my mother, or rather, the woman who had raised me as her daughter, that her entire family was built on a lie. I waited until she'd had her coffee. Mom was never fully human until she'd drained at least one cup, a trait she'd passed down to me. Or rather, a habit I'd picked up from her over 28 years of observation. Not genetics, after all. "Mom," I began, sitting across from her at our small kitchen table, "there's something I need to tell you. About Grandma." She looked up, her eyes still red-rimmed from crying. "What is it, honey?" I took a deep breath and placed the wooden box between us. "Before she died, Grandma gave me this." Mom frowned, setting down her mug. "I've never seen that before." "I know. She kept it hidden." My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened the lid and removed the hospital bracelet. "This is a baby bracelet from the night I was born. But it has a different name on it." She took it, squinting at the faded type. Confusion creased her forehead. "Baby girl Davison? I don't understand." "Mom," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Grandma told me that I was switched at birth. That I'm not. I'm not biologically yours." She stared at me, then at the bracelet, then back at me. "That's ridiculous. Of course you're mine. I gave birth to you. I would know my own child." She left a letter explaining everything. I slid the paper across the table. "And this locket with a picture of my biological parents." Mom didn't touch either item. Her hands had begun to tremble, coffee sloshing over the rim of her mug. "This isn't funny, Olivia." "I'm not trying to be funny. I'm telling you what Grandma told me. Your grandmother was old and confused, on heavy medication. You can't possibly believe—" "Look at the picture, Mom." I opened the locket and placed it in front of her. "Look at the woman's smile. The same dimple I have. Look at the man's eyes, the exact same color as mine." She stared at the tiny photograph, her face draining of color. "This is insane, absolutely insane. I know it sounds crazy, but Grandma was lucid when she told me. She said she saw the nurse make the switch, that someone paid for it to happen." Mom pushed back her chair so violently it toppled over. "I don't want to hear any more of this. Your grandmother was confused. End of story." "Mom, please, no!" She was shouting now, tears streaming down her face. "You are my daughter. I carried you for 9 months. I felt you kick inside me. I went through 22 hours of labor to bring you into this world. No one switched you with another baby." I flinched at her outburst but held my ground. "I need to find out the truth. There's a woman out there named Emily Palmer who might be your biological daughter." Mom covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. "This will destroy us, Olivia. Can't you see that? Even entertaining this fantasy will tear apart everything we have. Or it might give you back the daughter you should have." "Had?" I said softly. "Don't you want to know?" She lowered her hands, her expression hardening. "No, I don't. My daughter is sitting right in front of me, and I don't need a DNA test or some wild story from beyond the grave to tell me otherwise." She stormed out of the kitchen. Moments later, I heard her bedroom door slam. I sat alone at the table, the evidence of my true identity scattered before me. I had expected denial, even anger, but the finality in her voice had caught me off guard. She wouldn't help me. She wouldn't even consider the possibility. I would have to do this alone. That evening, I packed a small suitcase. Just enough clothes for a week, my laptop, and the wooden box with its life-altering contents. I scribbled a note for Mom. "I need to find answers. I'll call when I get there. I love you. Nothing will ever change that. Olivia. I didn't know if she'd still be speaking to me by the time I returned. I didn't know if I'd still be the same person, but I couldn't ignore Grandma Eleanor's dying confession. I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes. The 3-hour drive to Mapleton was quiet and tense. I kept the radio off, needing the silence to organize my thoughts. What would I say to Catherine Davison? Hi, I'm the daughter you gave birth to, but someone switched me with another baby, and by the way, my grandmother was complicit in the cover-up? And what about Emily Palmer, the woman who had grown up as a Palmer, with my mother, in my place? Did she know? Was she happy? Did she look like my mother, the way I apparently looked like Catherine Davison? By the time I pulled into Mapleton, my palms were sweating despite the cool spring air. It was a small town, the kind where everyone knows everyone else's business. Finding Catherine Davison wouldn't be difficult. I checked into the only motel in town, a clean but dated place called Pine View Lodge. The elderly man at the front desk smiled warmly as he handed me the key. What brings you to Mapleton, miss? Not many tourists this time of year. I hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. I'm looking for someone. Catherine Davison? I believe she lives here. His eyes lit with recognition. Kathy. Sure, everyone knows Kathy. She runs the bookstore on Main Street, Turning Pages. Been there almost 20 years now. My heart lurched. Is it open now? He checked his watch. Should be. She stays open till 6 most days. I thanked him, dropped my suitcase in my room, and was back in my car within minutes. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the steering. Wheel with all my strength as I drove the short distance to Main Street. Turning Pages was a charming storefront with bay windows displaying carefully arranged books. A bell jingled cheerfully as I pushed open the door, the smell of paper and coffee enveloping me. There were a few customers browsing the shelves. Behind the counter stood a woman in her early 50s with chestnut hair streaked with silver and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She was helping an elderly customer find a specific title, laughing at something the woman had said. She had my smile, my exact smile, right down to the dimple that appeared on her left cheek. And when she turned to reach for a book on a high shelf, I saw she moved with the same slight tilt of the head that Mom had always said was my thinking pose. This was Catherine Davison, my birth mother. I froze just inside the doorway, suddenly unable to move or speak. What was I doing here? What right did I have to upend this woman's life? To tell her that the daughter she'd raised for 28 years wasn't actually hers. Before I could turn and flee, she looked up and noticed me. Her smile was automatic, professional. Hello there. Let me know if you need help finding anything. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My fingers fumbled with the clasp of my purse, searching for the locket. Are you all right, dear? Catherine asked, her brow creasing with concern. That expression, I'd seen it in my own mirror countless times. I'm looking for Catherine Davison, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. That's me, she said, coming around the counter. What can I help you with? I pulled out the locket with trembling fingers and held it out to her. Do you recognize this? She took it, confusion evident in her expression. Then she opened it and gasped, one hand flying to her mouth. Where did you get this? This is James and me, our wedding day. Her eyes, wide with shock, lifted to my face. Who are you? My name is Olivia Palmer, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. But I think I was born Olivia Davison. The color drained from her face. She swayed slightly, and I reached out to steady her, but she flinched away from my touch. That's impossible, she whispered. My daughter is Emily Davison. I know, I said softly. I believe she was born Emily Palmer. I took a deep breath. My grandmother confessed on her deathbed that I was switched at birth. At St. Michael's Hospital on May 17th, 1991. Catherine stared at me, her eyes traveling over my features with new intensity. I could see her cataloging the similarities between me and the man in the locket photo, my biological father. James's eyes, she murmured, almost to herself. Exactly his eyes. The bell over the door jingled again as a customer left. We were alone in the store now, standing in a bubble of impossible truth. I know this is a shock, I said. It was for me, too. But I have evidence. I reached into my purse and pulled out the hospital bracelet. This was in a box my grandmother kept, hidden, along with newspaper clippings from that day and a letter explaining what she knew. Catherine took the bracelet, her hands trembling violently. Baby girl Davison, she read aloud. Then she looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. You're saying that my Emily is actually Emily Palmer, I finished gently. Yes, that's what I believe. She sank onto a nearby chair, still clutching the bracelet. This can't be happening. Emily is my daughter. I raised her. I know her. And Karen Palmer raised me, I said, my own eyes filling with tears. She still doesn't believe it either. Catherine was silent for a long moment, staring at the bracelet. Then she looked up, her expression hardening. I need proof, real proof, not just some bracelet and a locket that could have come from anywhere. I understand, I said. I want proof too. Would you be willing to do a DNA test? Both of us, and Emily too, if she's willing? She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes, I need to know. But, she faltered, this will destroy Emily. She's already been through so much. What do you mean? Catherine's eyes clouded. Emily has struggled her whole life, health problems since she was a baby, learning disabilities, and 3 years ago she was diagnosed with a rare genetic condition. The doctors said it runs in families, but there was no history of it on either side. She looked up, a new fear dawning in her eyes. But if she's not biologically ours? My heart clenched. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. No, Catherine said, suddenly decisive. No, we need to know the truth. If what you're saying is true, then Emily has been suffering from a condition she inherited from strangers, while her real family, the Palmers, might have vital medical information that could help her. I nodded, relieved she was beginning to see reason. My grandmother said the switch wasn't an accident, that someone paid for it to happen. Do you have any idea who would do that? Or why? Catherine's expression darkened. If this is true, and I'm not saying I believe it yet, then I have some suspicions. But I need to speak with Emily first, and I want that DNA test before we go any further. Of course, I agreed. When can I meet Emily? Catherine checked her watch. She should be home from work soon. I close the shop in 20 minutes. If you're sure you want to do this today. I'm sure, I said, though my heart was pounding with anxiety. I've waited 28 years without knowing. I don't want to wait any longer. She nodded, her expression grim. Wait here while I close up. Then we'll go to my house. But I should warn you, Emily may not take this well. Her health has made her fragile in some ways. As Catherine moved around the store, turning off lights and counting the register, I stood frozen, overwhelmed by what was about to happen. In less than an hour, I would meet the woman who had lived my life, who had suffered through illness and challenges that should have been mine. What if she hated me for bringing this news? What if she refused the DNA test? What if the test proved Grandma Eleanor had been wrong, and I'd torn apart 2 families for nothing? Too late for doubts now. Catherine was locking the front door, gesturing for me to follow her to the back exit. My car's in the alley, she said, her voice tight. You can follow me home. The drive to Catherine's house was the longest 10 minutes of my life. I followed her modest sedan through the quiet streets of Mapleton, past neat houses with budding spring gardens and children's bicycles in driveways. Catherine's home was a small blue bungalow with white trim and a well-tended front yard. As we pulled into the driveway, I noticed another car already parked there, presumably Emily's. "She's home," Catherine said unnecessarily as we got out of our cars. She looked pale, almost ill with anxiety. "Let me go in first and explain. Wait here until I call you in." I nodded, suddenly unable to speak. Catherine disappeared inside, leaving me standing alone in the gathering dusk, staring at the house where Emily Davison, had grown up instead of me. 5 minutes passed. 10. The lights were on inside, but the curtains were drawn. I couldn't see what was happening, couldn't hear any voices. Finally, the front door opened. Catherine stood there, her expression unreadable. "Come in," she said quietly. "Emily's ready to meet you." I followed her into a cozy living room with well-worn furniture and bookshelves lining the walls. And there, sitting in an armchair by the window, was Emily. My first thought was how little she resembled me. Where I was tall and lean, she was petite, almost fragile-looking. My hair was dark brown, nearly black. Hers was a warm honey blonde. But then she looked up, and I saw my mother's eyes staring back at me. That distinctive Palmer green, wide-set and almond-shaped. "So you're the one," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "The one who thinks we were switched." I nodded, suddenly breathless. "I'm Olivia." "I know who you are," she said. "My mother has explained your theory." "It's not just a theory," I said gently. "I have evidence, and I'd like to do a DNA test to confirm it." Emily's laugh was bitter. "DNA? Yes, that would settle it, wouldn't it? Prove once and for all which family's defective genes I inherited." "Emily," Catherine said, warningly. "No, Mom, it's fine." Emily's gaze returned to me, sharp and assessing. "Do you know what it's like to grow up always sick? To have doctors puzzling over your symptoms because nothing in your family history explains them? To finally get a diagnosis of a genetic condition and have both parents look at each other in confusion because no one in either family has ever had it?" I swallowed hard. "No, I don't. I've been healthy my whole life." "Of course you have," she said bitterly. "Because you got my genes, not yours. You've been living my life while I suffered through the one you should have had." "Emily, that's enough," Catherine interjected. "This isn't Olivia's fault." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Then whose fault is it? Who would switch babies in a hospital? Who would do something so evil?" "That's what I'm trying to find out," I said quietly. "My grandmother mentioned a nurse named Marlene Winters. She said someone paid her to make the switch." Catherine gasped. "Marlene? I remember her. She was so kind during my labor. She brought me ice chips and held my hand when James had to step out." Her voice broke. "She's the one who brought Emily to me for the first time." The irony hung heavy in the air. The nurse Catherine remembered with such fondness was the same woman who had handed her the wrong baby, who had stolen her biological child and replaced it with another. "Grandma said Marlene owns a bakery now in Greenberg," I said. I was planning to go there next, to ask her why she did it. Emily stood up suddenly. Though she was smaller than me, there was a fierceness in her stance that commanded attention. "I'm coming with you." "Emily, your health," Catherine began. "I'm well enough for this," Emily interrupted. "I need to know why this woman ruined my life, why I've spent 28 years with a body that's been fighting itself." I looked. Between them, uncertain. "We should do the DNA test first, make sure we're not jumping to conclusions." "Fine," Emily said. "We'll do a test, but I don't need a lab to tell me what I can see with my own eyes." She gestured between herself and Catherine. I look nothing like either of my parents. I never have. But you, she pointed at me, you have my mother's smile, her dimple. And from the pictures I've seen, you have my father's eyes. She was right. The evidence was written on our faces, in the quirks of our smiles and the colors of our eyes. When can we get the test done? I asked. Tomorrow, Catherine said decisively. First thing. There's a clinic in the next town over that does paternity tests. They can rush the results for an extra fee. Emily nodded, then turned to me with a sudden intensity. Stay here tonight. We have a guest room. I want to know everything about you, about the life you've lived with my genes. The request startled me. Are you sure? I have a motel room. Stay, Catherine echoed. Please, we have a lot to talk about. And so I stayed. I called my mother, Karen, from Catherine's kitchen, explaining where I was and what was happening. She answered with icy brevity, making it clear she still believed this was all a terrible mistake. But she didn't tell me to come home, didn't forbid me from pursuing the truth. That night, the three of us sat around Catherine's dining table, sharing stories from our lives. I learned that Emily had been hospitalized 6 times before her 10th birthday, with mysterious symptoms that baffled doctors. That she'd struggled in school not because she wasn't intelligent, she clearly was razor sharp, but because she missed so many days due to illness. That 3 years ago, she'd finally been diagnosed with a rare genetic condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which explained the joint pain, easy bruising, and chronic fatigue she'd battled her entire life. The doctor said it was definitely hereditary, Emily explained, her fingers tracing patterns on the wooden table. But neither mom nor dad had any family history of connective tissue disorders. It didn't make sense. Until now, Catherine said, quietly. I shared stories of my own childhood. Healthy, active, academically successful. How I'd played soccer from age 6 through college. How I'd rarely even caught colds when they went around school. You got my immune system, Emily said, with a wry twist of her lips. Lucky you. As the night wore on, the initial tension began to ease. We were 3 women caught in an impossible situation, victims of a crime committed before 2 of us could even form memories. Whatever happened next, we were in it together. The next morning, we drove to the clinic in the neighboring town, the Tata. Staff raised eyebrows at our unusual request, 3 women wanting to determine maternal relationships, but took our samples efficiently. We paid extra for expedited results, which they promised within 48 hours. What now? I asked as we left. The clinic. Do we wait for the results, or do we visit Marlene Winters? Catherine and Emily exchanged glances. Marlene, they said in unison. And so we drove to Greenburgh, a town about 40 minutes from Mapleton. Sweet Sensations Bakery was on the main street, a cheerful storefront with pink awnings and a display of elaborate cakes in the window. My stomach clenched as we parked across the street. This woman had altered the course of our lives with a single act. She had robbed Emily of the healthy life she should have had and given it to me instead. She had taken me from my biological parents and placed me with strangers. Ready? Catherine asked, her voice tight. Emily nodded grimly. Let's get some answers. The bakery smelled of vanilla and cinnamon, warm and inviting. Behind the counter stood a woman in her 60s, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, flour dusting her apron. She smiled as we entered. Good morning, ladies. What can I get for you today? I stepped forward, my heart hammering against my ribs. Are you Marlene Winters? Her smile faltered slightly. Yes, that's me. Have we met? No, I said quietly. But you met us once, a long time ago, at St. Michael's Hospital. May 17th, 1991. The color drained from her face. The piping bag she was holding slipped from her fingers, splattering frosting across the counter. I don't know what you're talking about. Catherine moved to stand beside me. I think you do, Marlene. You were my labor and delivery nurse when I had my daughter, except the baby you gave me wasn't actually mine, was she? Marlene's eyes darted between us, then to Emily, who had positioned herself near the door as if to prevent escape. You need to leave. Not until you tell us why, Emily said, her voice hard. Why you switched us. Who paid you to do it? Paid me? Marlene echoed, genuine confusion in her expression. No one paid me anything. I did what I was told. What they said had to be done. Who told you? I pressed. Who wanted us switched? Marlene shook her head, backing away until she hit the wall behind her. I can't. He'll kill me if I talk. He said he would. Who? Catherine demanded. Who threatened you? Marlene's eyes filled with tears. Victor Palmer, she whispered. Your father-in-law, Mrs. Davison. He's the one who made me do it. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Victor Palmer, my grandfather. My mother's father, who had died when I was 12. The stern, cold man I remembered from awkward holiday dinners and obligatory birthday visits. That's impossible, I said. Why would he want to switch his own grandchild with a stranger's baby? Marlene's gaze shifted to Emily, something like pity in her eyes. Because of the test results. What test results? Emily demanded. The genetic screening, Marlene said. All babies born at St. Michael's that year were part of a research study. They tested for genetic markers of various conditions. She swallowed hard. Your results showed markers for a serious connective tissue disorder. And Victor Palmer. He couldn't have a granddaughter with defective genes. The words hung in the air like poison. Emily's face drained of color. Are you saying, Catherine said slowly, her voice shaking with rage, that Victor Palmer arranged to switch his own granddaughter with my healthy baby because he found out she might develop a genetic condition? Marlene nodded miserably. He was obsessed with the Palmer family legacy, with having perfect descendants. When he saw those test results, he came to the hospital and demanded to see me. Said he knew about my financial troubles, my son's medical bills. Said he could make it all go away if I just made a simple switch. I felt physically ill. And you agreed? You switched 2 innocent babies because a man with a eugenics fetish paid you to? He didn't just pay me, Marlene whispered. He threatened me. Said if I didn't do it, he'd make sure my son never received treatment again, that we'd be ruined. Her shoulders slumped. I've regretted it every day since, every single day. Emily stepped forward, her face a mask of cold fury. Do you have any idea what you've done? The life you stole from me? The suffering I've endured because of your choice? Marlene couldn't meet her eyes. I'm sorry. I know it means nothing. But I am truly sorry. You're right, Emily said flatly. It means nothing. Catherine placed a steadying hand on Emily's shoulder. We need proof of this, Marlene. Something to corroborate your story. Marlene hesitated, then nodded. I kept records. Letters from Victor, details of the transaction. I was afraid he'd double-cross me, so I made sure I had evidence. She glanced toward the back of the bakery. Wait here, Marlene said, her voice barely above a whisper. She disappeared through a door marked Employees Only, leaving the 3 of us standing in stunned silence. Victor Palmer, Catherine said, testing the name on her tongue like it was poison. Your grandfather? I nodded, still trying to process the revelation. He died when I was 12. I barely knew him. Mom always said he was difficult, cold, demanding perfection. But this... I shook my head in disbelief. This is monstrous. Emily's hands were trembling. Whether from rage or shock, I couldn't tell. He threw me away, she said, her voice hollow. Before I'd even lived a day, He looked at some test results and decided I wasn't worthy of the precious Palmer name. I reached for her hand instinctively. She flinched but didn't pull away. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. The words felt woefully inadequate. Before Emily could respond, Marlene returned with a weathered manila envelope. "Everything's in here," she said, placing it on the counter between us. "Victor's letters, copies of the bank transfers, even the original test results from the study." Catherine seized the envelope with shaking hands. "Why keep this all these years? Why not come forward?" Marlene's eyes darted nervously to the bakery windows, as if expecting Victor Palmer's ghost to materialize on the sidewalk outside. "Fear," she admitted. "Victor made it clear what would happen if I ever spoke up. And after he died, well, the habit of silence was already formed." She paused, wringing her flour-dusted hands. "And shame. So much shame." I peered over Catherine's shoulder as she opened the envelope. The first document she pulled out was yellowed with age, the letterhead bearing the St. Michael's Hospital logo and the words Genetic Screening Initiative, Confidential. Catherine read aloud. "Patient ID 910517B. Palmer, female. Markers detected for type 3 collagen mutation consistent with vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Recommend follow-up with genetic counselor." Emily made a small, choked sound. "That's my diagnosis. Exactly what they told me 3 years ago." The next item was a handwritten note on heavy stationery embossed with the initials VP. "Nurse Winters. The arrangement we discussed must be executed tonight. The Palmer child, room 304, is to be switched with the Davison child, room 312. Both mothers are currently sedated and will not witness the exchange. Complete this task as discussed, and the promised funds will be transferred to your account by morning. Remember our agreement regarding discretion. Your son's future depends on it. V. Palmer." My stomach churned with revulsion, the coldness of it, the calculating precision. This man had been my grandfather. This was the blood that ran in my veins. Except it wasn't. The blood in my veins belonged to James and Catherine Davison. I was their daughter, not Victor Palmer's granddaughter at all. The realization hit me with unexpected force. I wasn't who I'd thought I was for 28 years. My entire identity had been built on a deliberate lie. "There's more," Catherine said, pulling out bank statements showing transfers of $50,000 to an account in Marlene's name, dated May 18, 1991, the EI day after our births, and photographs. A much younger Marlene standing beside a stern-looking man in an expensive suit, Victor Palmer, both of them in what appeared to be a hospital corridor. "He came to supervise," Marlene explained, seeing us examine the photo, "to make sure it was done properly. He even brought a camera to document that I'd fulfilled my part of the bargain." "He took photos of committing a crime?" I asked incredulously. "Victor Palmer believed himself untouchable," Marlene said simply. "And in many ways he was. His money, his connections. Who would dare accuse him?" Emily had gone very still, her eyes fixed on the documents spread across the counter. "All this time," she said softly. "All the doctors, the tests, the pain, and the answer was so simple. I wasn't a medical mystery. I was exactly what that test said I would be." She looked up at Marlene, her expression hardening. "You robbed me of early intervention, of treatments that might have helped if they'd been started sooner. You robbed me of knowing my medical history." Marlene flinched as if struck. "I know, and nothing I say can undo that harm." "No," Emily agreed coldly. "It can't." Catherine gathered the documents with deliberate care, sliding them back into the envelope. "We're taking these," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "And we're going to the police." Marlene nodded, resignation written across her features. "I understand. I won't run. When they come for me, I'll confess to everything." She hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I tried to check on you both over the years, from a distance. I sent anonymous donations to Emily's medical fund when I heard about her hospitalizations. Blood money," Emily spat. We left the bakery in silence, the envelope clutched tightly in Catherine's hands. None of us spoke until we were back in the car, driving away from Greenberg. "What now?" I finally asked. "Do we really go to the police?" Catherine glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Of course, this was a crime, multiple crimes. But after 28 years, will they even pursue it? And what good would it do to have Marlene arrested now? I wasn't defending her actions. They were indefensible, but I wasn't sure what justice would look like in this situation. "It's not about Marlene," Emily said from the passenger seat. "It's about creating an official record of what was done. To us, it's about acknowledgement." She turned to look at me. "And it's about your mother. She needs to know who her father really was." My mother, Karen Palmer. The woman who had raised me, loved me, protected me, all without knowing I wasn't hers by birth. How would this revelation affect her? Learning not only that I wasn't her biological daughter, but that her own father had orchestrated the switch. Out of some twisted eugenic ideology? "She won't believe it," I said. "She barely believed me about the switch. This will destroy her." "The truth often does destroy things," Catherine said quietly. "But sometimes that destruction is necessary for healing to begin." I thought about that as we drove back to Mapleton. Destruction before healing, tearing down the false before building something true. It made sense, but it didn't make it any less terrifying. When we arrived at Catherine's house, my phone was buzzing with notifications. 3 missed calls from Mom, a text message, "Please call me, we need to talk." My heart raced as I stepped onto the porch to return her call. She answered on the first ring. "Olivia, where are you?" Her voice was tight with worry. "I'm still in Mapleton, with Catherine and Emily Davison." I took a deep breath. "Mom, we found something, about why the switch happened, about who was responsible." A long pause, then, "Who?" I closed my eyes, bracing myself. "Grandpa Victor, your father." The silence that followed was so complete I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard a shaky exhale. "I'm coming there," she said. "Text me the address. I'm leaving now." "Mom, it's a 3-hour drive." "I'm leaving now," she repeated, and hung up. I stood on the porch, phone in hand, staring at the darkening sky. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of orange and pink. Such a beautiful evening for such ugly truths. Inside, Catherine was making tea while Emily sat at the kitchen table, methodically going through the contents of Marlene's envelope again. They both looked up when I entered. "My mother's coming," I said. "She'll be here in a few hours." Catherine nodded slowly. "Good. We should all be together for this." Emily's expression was harder to read. "Does she know about Victor?" "I told her he was responsible, not the details." I sank into a chair across from her. I don't think she believed me about the switch until now, but something in her voice when I mentioned him. I think she might have suspected he was capable of something like this. Catherine placed mugs of tea in front of us. What was he like? Victor Palmer? I tried to summon memories of my grandfather. No, not my grandfather. My mother's father. Cold, I said finally. Intimidating. He wasn't around much when I was growing up. Mom always said they had a complicated relationship. He'd visit on holidays, bring expensive gifts, but there was never any warmth. I frowned, remembering something. He used to make these odd comments about my appearance. Said I had good stock and strong genes. I thought it was just old person talk, but now it seems more sinister, Emily finished for me. like he was congratulating himself on his successful experiment. I nodded, a chill running down my spine. The few times I was sick as a child, just normal kid stuff, chickenpox, strep throat, he'd get this disapproving look, like I'd failed some test. Because in his mind you had, Emily said bitterly. You were supposed to be the perfect Palmer specimen, the healthy replacement for his defective granddaughter. The words hung in the air between us, sharp and painful. I reached across the table and covered Emily's hand with mine. You aren't defective. You never were. She didn't pull away, but her smile was sad. In my darker moments, I used to imagine there had been some cosmic mistake, that I was meant for a different life, a different body. Turns out I was right. We spent the next hour sharing more stories, filling in the gaps of each other's lives. I learned that Emily had studied literature in college, working around her health limitations, and now managed the online portion of her mother's bookstore. She'd never married, partly because of her health concerns, partly because of trust issues stemming from a lifetime of feeling different, misunderstood. I told them about my career in physical therapy, ironically, a field I'd chosen because I wanted to help people overcome physical limitations. About my broken engagement 2 years ago to a man who'd ultimately decided he wasn't ready for commitment. About the persistent feeling of not quite belonging that had followed me throughout my life despite my mother's love. Maybe some part of me always knew, I mused, that I wasn't where I was supposed to be. Catherine listened to both of us with an expression of mingled grief and wonder. I keep seeing it now, she said. The parts of each of you that belong to different families. Emily has Karen's eyes, her mannerisms, and Olivia has James's intense focus, his way of tilting her head when she's thinking. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted our conversation. I glanced at my watch. It had only been 2.5 hours since I'd spoken to Mom. She must have broken every speed limit between Riverdale and Mapleton. I met her at the door. She looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed, her normally perfect hair disheveled. She must have left directly from work. She was still wearing her real estate blazer, the gold Karen Palmer name tag pinned to the lapel. Mom, I said, suddenly fighting tears. Despite everything, despite knowing now that we weren't related, by blood, the sight of her still filled me with a rush of love and relief. She pulled me into a fierce hug. I'm here, she whispered. I'm here now. I led her into the kitchen where Catherine and Emily had risen to their feet. For a long moment, the four of us simply stared at each other. 2 mothers, 2 daughters, connected by an invisible thread of tragedy and deception. Mom's eyes fixed on Emily, widening with recognition. You have my mother's eyes, she said, softly. The exact same color. Emily nodded, her expression guarded. And you have my father's chin, the strong jawline. Mom turned to Catherine, extending her hand formally. Karen Palmer, I believe you've been raising my daughter. Catherine took her hand, but instead of shaking it, she held it between both, of hers. And you've been raising mine. Thank you for loving her so well. The simple exchange broke something open in the room. Mom's composure crumbled, and she sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. I didn't know, she said, her voice muffled. I swear I didn't know what my father did. We believe you, I said quickly, sitting beside her. No one thinks you were involved. She lowered her hands, her expression haunted. But I should have suspected. I knew what he was like. His obsession with the Palmer legacy, with genetic superiority. When I was pregnant, he insisted on every test available. He was so focused on having a perfect grandchild. Her voice broke. I just never imagined he would go this far. Catherine placed the manila envelope on the table between us. We have proof. Letters, bank records, even the original genetic screening that triggered his actions. Mom stared at the envelope as if it might bite her. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached for it. May I? Catherine nodded. You should see it all. We sat in silence as Mom went through the documents, her face growing paler with each page she turned. When she reached Victor's handwritten note, her hands began to shake so violently that the paper rattled. That's his handwriting, she whispered. I'd know it anywhere. Emily, who had been standing apart from us, finally spoke. Did you ever suspect that I wasn't your biological child? Mom looked up at her, tears streaming down her face. There were moments, she admitted. Times when I couldn't see myself or your father in you. When doctors asked about family medical history, and nothing matched your symptoms. But I told myself it was normal, that genetics are complicated, that not every child resembles their parents. She set the papers down and stood, moving toward Emily with cautious steps. May I? She asked, her hands hovering uncertainly. Emily hesitated, then nodded once. Mom reached out and gently touched her face, tracing the line of her cheekbone, the curve of her jaw. You are so beautiful, she said softly, and so strong, to have endured everything you have. Emily's carefully maintained composure cracked. A single tear slid down her cheek. I wasn't strong. I was angry, all the time. Angry at my body for betraying me. Angry at doctors for not having answers. Angry at the universe for singling me out for suffering. You had every right to be angry, Mom said. But you survived. You built a life despite everything. That is strength. Emily closed her eyes briefly, leaning almost imperceptibly into Mom's touch. Then she straightened, composing herself. We need to decide what happens next. What we do with this information. Mom nodded, returning to her seat. Yes, the police, obviously. This was a crime. And a civil lawsuit, Catherine added, against the hospital for negligence, against Marlene Winters for her part in it. The Palmer estate, Mom said firmly. My father's estate should compensate Emily for the medical expenses she's incurred, for the suffering his actions caused. I had been quiet, watching this exchange. Now I spoke up. And what about us? The four of us? What happens to our relationships? The question hung in the air. None of us had an answer ready. Catherine broke the silence first. I don't think there's a roadmap for this situation. We're in uncharted territory. I know I'm not your mother by birth, Mom said, looking directly at me. But I've loved you every day of your life. That doesn't change because of a DNA test. Or a criminal's actions. And I've raised Emily since she was minutes old, Catherine added. She is my daughter in every way that matters. Emily and I exchanged glances. But where does that leave us? She asked. Do we just go back to our separate lives knowing what we know now? Pretend this never happened? No, I said firmly. We don't pretend. We build something new, something honest. Mom reached for my hand. What does that look like to you? I thought for a moment. I think it looks like having two mothers instead of one. Two families instead of one. I looked at Emily, and a sister I never knew I had. A ghost of a smile touched Emily's lips. Sister, she repeated, testing the word. I've always been an only child. So have I said. Maybe we could learn together. The tension in the room eased slightly. No one had all the answers, but at least we were asking the questions together. That night, all four of us stayed at Catherine's house. Mom took the couch, insisting she'd slept in worse places during her real estate career. I remained in the guest room, while Emily and Catherine retired to their own bedrooms. Sleep eluded me. I lay awake, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened. In just 3 days, my entire identity had been uprooted. I was not Olivia Palmer, daughter of Karen and Robert Palmer. I was Olivia Davison, switched. at birth through the criminal actions of a man obsessed with genetic purity. Yet despite this knowledge, I didn't feel like Olivia Davison. I had no memories of Catherine and James, no connection to the Davison family history. I was still the person who had been shaped by Karen's love, by the life I'd lived as a Palmer. Around 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and crept downstairs for a glass of water. I was surprised to find Emily already at the kitchen table, illuminated only by the dim light above the stove. "Couldn't sleep either?" I asked softly. She shook her head. Too much to process. I filled a glass from the tap and sat across from her. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything. Nothing." She sighed. Mostly wondering who I would have been if Victor Palmer hadn't interfered, if I'd grown up as Emily Palmer instead of Emily Davison. "I wonder the same thing," I admitted. "If I'd grown up here, in Mapleton, with Catherine and James as my parents." Emily traced patterns on the tabletop with her finger. "Would we have been different people, do you think? Or are we who we are regardless of our circumstances?" It was the fundamental question of nature versus nurture, played out in our disrupted lives. "I think elements of both," I said thoughtfully. "Some things seem hardwired, your intelligence, my athleticism. But so much of identity is shaped by experience, by the stories we're told about ourselves." "The stories we're told," Emily repeated. "Like being told I was sickly, sensitive, fragile. Or you being told you were strong, capable, healthy." I nodded. Self-fulfilling prophecies in a way. We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes. Then Emily spoke again, her voice barely audible. "I've been angry for so long. At my body. At the universe. Now I know exactly who to be angry at. Victor Palmer. But he's dead. I can't confront him. I can't make him see what he did to me." "I'm angry too," I said. "He stole something precious. From all of us. He played God with our lives." "But there's something else," Emily said, meeting my eyes. "Something I'm afraid to admit." "What?" "Part of me is relieved." She swallowed hard. Relieved to finally have an explanation. To know that my condition wasn't some cosmic bad luck, but the result of a specific action taken by a specific person. There's clarity in that, horrible as it is. I understood what she meant. And relief that your struggles weren't random, but part of a larger story. She nodded. "Exactly. It doesn't lessen the pain or the anger, but it gives it context. Meaning, even, do you think you'll be okay?" I asked. "Eventually, I mean." Emily's smile was small but genuine. "I've been dealing with this condition my entire life. I've learned to adapt, to work around limitations. This is just one more adaptation." She paused. "What about you? Will you be okay?" I considered the question. "I think so. It's strange. I've lost part of my identity, but I've gained so much too. A new family, a sister, a different understanding of who I am." "A sister," Emily echoed, with that same testing tone she'd used earlier. "I suppose we are sisters in a way. Not by blood, but by shared experience. By this bizarre twist of fate that connected us." "I'd like to be your sister," I said simply, "if you'll have me." For the first time since we'd met, Emily's smile reached her eyes. "I think I'd like that too." We talked until dawn, sharing stories from our childhoods, discovering surprising parallels in our lives despite the vast differences in our experiences. Emily had been drawn to books because they offered escape from her physical limitations. I had been drawn to sports because they celebrated what my body could do. Both of us had struggled with relationships, though for different reasons. Her, because of fear her condition would be a burden. Me because of a persistent feeling that something was missing, that I wasn't quite where I belonged. As the first light of morning filtered through the kitchen window, Emily asked the question that had been hovering unspoken between all of us. What happens when the DNA results come back? When it's official? I had been thinking about this, too. We move forward, I guess. We file the police report. We consult lawyers about the civil case. We figure out how to be a very unconventional family. Emily nodded slowly. Mom will want you to stay, to get to know her, to learn about your biological father. And my mother, Karen, she'll expect me to come home, I said, to continue being her daughter. You can be both, Emily said thoughtfully. Just as I can be Karen's daughter too, if she wants that. The idea was simultaneously simple and revolutionary. We didn't have to choose one family over the other. We could expand, include, embrace the complexity of our situation. It won't be easy, I cautioned. There will be awkward moments, misunderstandings. Nothing about my life has been easy, Emily said with a wry smile. Why start now? The sound of movement upstairs signaled that Catherine and Mom were waking. Soon they would join us, and we would continue the difficult, necessary work of rebuilding our understanding of family. Whatever happens, I said, reaching across the table to take Emily's hand. We're in this together now. She squeezed my hand gently. Together, she agreed. Sisters. As the morning light strengthened, casting long golden beams across the kitchen floor, I felt something shift inside me. Not a dramatic revelation, but a quiet settling. The truth, painful as it was, had been brought into the light, and in that light, something new was beginning to grow. We heard footsteps on the stairs, and Emily and I exchanged a glance of understanding. Our mothers were coming. It was time to begin the next chapter of our shared story. The DNA results arrived by email at 10:42 a.m. the following day. We were all gathered in Catherine's living room, Mom and I on the couch, Catherine in her reading chair, Emily perched on the window seat. The anticipation in the room was palpable as I opened the message on my laptop. It's confirmed, I said, scanning the report. 97% probability that Catherine Davison is my biological mother, and 98% probability that Karen Palmer is Emily's biological mother. Although we had all known this was coming, the official confirmation still landed with physical force. Mom exhaled sharply. Catherine pressed a hand to her mouth, and Emily closed her eyes briefly. So it's real, Mom said softly. It's really true. Yes, I confirmed. We were switched at birth, just as Grandma Eleanor said. I scrolled through the report. They recommend follow-up testing with any living male relatives to confirm paternal relationships, but the maternal connection is definitive. Catherine stood, moving to Emily's side and placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. What now? She asked, looking between Mom and me. Mom straightened her shoulders, that familiar determination settling over her features. Now we take this to the police. We make it official. She met Catherine's eyes. And then we decide together how to move forward as a family. As a family, Catherine repeated, a note of wonder in her voice. Yes, I think that's what we are now, aren't we? A rather unusual one, but a family nonetheless. I looked at Emily, remembering our conversation from the night before. Not one family, I said. One extended family, with room for all of us. For the first time since this journey began, I felt not just shock or confusion or anger, but something like hope. The truth, however painful, had been revealed. The past could not be changed, but the future, that was still ours to shape. Victor Palmer had tried to play God with our lives, to decide who deserved the Palmer name based on genetic testing. But in doing so, he had ultimately failed. Because here we were, 28 years later, choosing to define family on our own terms. Choosing connection over division. Truth over comfortable lies. It wouldn't be easy. There would be legal battles. Ahead, emotional reckonings, the challenge of building relationships that had no precedent or roadmap. But as I looked around at these three women, my two mothers and my sister not by blood, I knew we would find our way through together. The simple, devastating truth my grandmother had revealed with her dying words had shattered the foundation of my life. But from those broken pieces, something new and unexpected was emerging. Something that, despite everything, felt like healing. The Riverdale police station was housed in a squat brick building that looked like it belonged in another era. Officer Jenkins, a middle-aged woman with salt and pepper hair pulled into a tight bun, listened to our story with an expression that shifted from skepticism to shock to grim determination. "Let me get this straight," she said, after we'd presented the DNA results, Marlene's confession, and the damning evidence from Victor Palmer. 28 years ago, Victor Palmer arranged for 2 newborns to be switched because one showed genetic markers for a medical condition? "Yes," Mom confirmed, her voice steady despite the emotion I knew she was suppressing. "My father committed this crime, and we're here to officially report it." Officer Jenkins shook her head, clearly struggling to process the magnitude of what we were describing. "I've been in law enforcement for 22 years, and I've never encountered anything like this." She tapped her pen against her notepad. "The statute of limitations on most crimes would have expired, but this might qualify as a form of child abduction or trafficking. We'll need to consult the district attorney." Emily, who had been silent throughout most of the interview, leaned forward. "What about Marlene Winters? She admitted her role. She's still alive, still operating her business in Greenburgh." "We'll coordinate with Greenburgh PD to bring her in for questioning," Officer Jenkins assured us. "Her confession, combined with these documents, should be enough to open a formal investigation." Catherine placed a steadying hand on Emily's arm. "We understand there may be legal complexities. We just want an official record of what happened." "And you'll have it," Jenkins promised. "I'm assigning this case top priority. It's not every day we get evidence of a crime this." She searched for the right word. Calculated. We spent the next 3 hours providing detailed statements. Mom spoke of her father's obsession with the Palmer legacy, his eugenic views that she'd always found distasteful but had never imagined would lead to criminal action. Catherine recounted her pregnancy, her labor and delivery, the inexplicable health issues Emily had faced throughout childhood that had never made sense until now. Emily described her lifetime of medical struggles, the confusion of doctors, the recent diagnosis that should have come decades earlier. And I shared Grandma Eleanor's deathbed confession, the search that had led us to this moment. By the time we finished, the sky outside had darkened to deep indigo. Officer Jenkins escorted us to the door, a thick case file now assembled on her desk. "We'll be in touch within 48 hours, she promised. "In the meantime, I suggest you all consult with an attorney about civil action. The criminal case might face challenges due to time elapsed, but a civil suit could provide some measure of justice." As we stepped out into the cool evening air, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. For the first time since Grandma Eleanor's revelation, we had taken concrete action. We had made the private public, the hidden visible. "I never thought I'd be filing a police report against my own father," Mom said quietly as we walked to the parking lot. Catherine squeezed her shoulder. "You did the right thing, Karen. It took immense courage." Mom nodded, blinking back tears. "It still doesn't feel real, that he could do something so monstrous." "Maybe it didn't seem monstrous to him," Emily suggested, her voice surprisingly gentle. "Maybe in his twisted worldview, he was protecting the Palmer legacy, ensuring his bloodline remained pure." She spoke the last word with undisguised bitterness. "That doesn't excuse it," Mom said firmly. "No," Emily agreed. "It doesn't. But understanding his mindset might help us process what happened." was struck by Emily's willingness to analyze Victor Palmer's motives, to seek understanding rather than simply rage against what he'd done. Despite everything she'd suffered because of his actions, she was striving for comprehension. It was yet another demonstration of her remarkable strength. "What now?" I asked as we reached our cars. The question had become a refrain in our evolving relationship. "Dinner," Catherine said decisively. "We've been at the police station for hours, and none of us has eaten. There's a decent Italian place just down the street." The suggestion of something so normal, sharing a meal, after the intensity of the afternoon was oddly comforting. We piled into Catherine's car and drove to Salvatore's, a small restaurant with checkered tablecloths and candles in empty Chianti bottles, the cow. Hostess seated us at a quiet table in the corner. We ordered a bottle of red wine, and for a few minutes we focused on the simple pleasure of studying menus, discussing recommendations, making ordinary decisions. As we waited for our food, Mom raised her wine glass. "To truth," she said. "However, painful." "To justice," Emily added, lifting her own glass. "To family," Catherine continued, "in all its complicated forms." I raised my glass last. "To new beginnings." We clinked glasses, and I felt something shift in the air between us, a subtle realignment, a cautious embrace of possibility. The conversation over dinner meandered through lighter territory. Catherine shared stories about running her bookstore, the eccentric regulars who frequented it, her dream of expanding into the vacant space next door. Mom talked about her real estate career, how she'd built her business from nothing after Dad died, the satisfaction she found in helping families find homes. Emily and I exchanged glances across the table, watching our mothers find common ground, discovering shared interests and compatible senses of humor. They were so different. Catherine soft-spoken and contemplative, Mom energetic and direct. Yet they were forming a connection born of extraordinary circumstances. "They're getting along well," Emily murmured when the mothers were deep in conversation about the local housing market. I nodded. "It's strange, but also right, somehow. Like this is how it was always supposed to be." Emily tilted her head, studying me. "Do you believe in fate? That everything happens for a reason?" "I don't. No," I admitted. "I used to think so. Now I'm not sure. What happened to us wasn't fate. It was one man's deliberate choice." I paused, considering. But maybe how we respond to it, how we rebuild from here, maybe that part is up to us. "I like that," Emily said. "The idea that we have agency in this story, even if we didn't choose how it began." The waiter brought our entrees, momentarily interrupting our philosophical discussion. As we ate, the conversation turned practical again. "I need to get back to Riverdale soon," Mom said. "I have clients waiting, appointments scheduled." Catherine nodded. "And I have the bookstore to run." The unspoken question hung in the air. What about Emily and me? Where would we go from here? I took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about that. My lease in Riverdale is month to month. I could stay in Mapleton for a while, get to know Catherine, learn about James." I glanced at Mom, worried about hurting her feelings. "Not permanently, just—" "You should," Mom interrupted, surprising me. "You should take the time you need to connect with your biological family." Her smile was sad but genuine. "I've had you for 28 years. I can share you for a while." Catherine reached across the table and squeezed Mom's hand. "Thank you, Karen. That means more than I can express." She turned to Emily. "And you should visit Riverdale. Spend time with Karen. Learn about your Palmer heritage." Emily looked uncertain. "I don't know if I can take time away from work." "The online store can be managed from anywhere," Catherine reminded her. "And you've been talking about developing our social media presence. Maybe doing that from Riverdale would give you fresh perspective." Emily's gaze met mine. A trade, then? You stay in Mapleton while I go to Riverdale? Not a trade, I said. More like an exchange. A chance for both of us to explore the lives we might have had. An exchange, Emily repeated, nodding. Slowly. Yes, I think I'd like that. And so it was decided. Mom would return to Riverdale tomorrow, and Emily would follow in a few days. I would stay with Catherine, learning about the Davison family, discovering the history that should have been mine. We would maintain regular video calls, all four of us, sharing discoveries and processing emotions as they arose. It wasn't a perfect solution. Nothing could be in our unprecedented situation. But it was a beginning, a way forward through uncharted territory. That night, back at Catherine's house, I called my supervisor at the physical therapy clinic where I worked to request a leave of absence. To my relief, she was understanding, even supportive when I explained the extraordinary circumstances. Take the time you need, she said. Your position will be waiting when you're ready to return. One obstacle cleared. Now I just needed to pack up my apartment, arrange for bills to be forwarded, and tie up the loose ends of the life I was temporarily leaving behind. As I prepared for bed in Catherine's guest room, which I supposed was now my room, at least for the time being, I was struck by the surreal nature of it all. 3 days ago, I had been Olivia Palmer, physical therapist, daughter of Karen, granddaughter of Eleanor. Now I was Olivia Davison, though I hadn't changed my name officially, biological daughter of Catherine and James, switched at birth in a scheme orchestrated by a man obsessed with genetic purity. Identity was such a fragile thing, I realized. We built our sense of self on foundations we assumed were solid: family, history, genetics. But what happened when those foundations were revealed to be fabrications? Who was I, really, beneath the names and narratives I'd inherited? These philosophical questions followed me into sleep, where they transformed into vivid dreams of hospital corridors, babies in bassinets, and Victor Palmer's cold, calculating eyes watching from the shadows. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Mom was leaving today, heading back to Riverdale to resume her life while processing the seismic revelations of the past few days. I found her in the kitchen, cradling a mug of coffee, staring out the window at Catherine's garden. Morning, I said, pouring myself a cup. Sleep okay? She smiled tiredly. Not really. Too much to think about. I sat beside her at the table. I know. It's overwhelming. She reached over and took my hand. I want you to know something, Olivia. Something important. Her eyes met mine, fierce with emotion. You have always been my daughter. From the first moment they placed you in my arms, you were mine. That doesn't change because of DNA or because of what my father did. I know, Mom, I said, squeezing her hand. You'll always be my mother. Nothing changes that. But something has changed, she acknowledged. You have another mother now, another family history to explore. And I want you to embrace that fully, without worrying about my feelings. I swallowed against the tightness in my throat. Thank you for understanding. Understanding is the least I can do after. She trailed off, but I knew what she meant. After what her father had done to Emily, to Catherine, to all of us. It wasn't your fault, I reminded her. You didn't know. But I should have suspected, she said, a familiar guilt shadowing her expression. There were signs, if I'd been willing to see them. The way he reacted when you were born, his strange comments about your health, his insistence on tracking your development. Hindsight makes everything clearer, I said gently. You couldn't have known what he was capable of. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. The burden of being Victor Palmer's daughter, of sharing blood with someone who had committed such a calculated crime, would weigh on her for a long time. Catherine joined us, already dressed for the day in jeans and a soft green sweater. Good morning, she greeted us. Emily's still sleeping. She had a rough night. The excitement of yesterday took a toll. Mom nodded in understanding. Her health. Is there anything specific I should know if she comes to stay with me? Medications? Emergency procedures? Catherine's expression softened at Mom's concern. She manages it well now, but yes, there are a few things to be aware of. She sat down with us, outlining Emily's medication schedule, the warning signs of a flare-up, the techniques that helped during bad days. Mom listened intently, asking questions, taking mental notes. It was clear she was already thinking of Emily as someone under her care, someone she was responsible for protecting. Motherhood, I realized, transcended biology. Mom had raised me, as her own, despite the lack of genetic connection. Now she was preparing to extend that same maternal concern to Emily, her biological daughter who had grown up as a stranger. After breakfast, we helped Mom pack her car for the drive back to Riverdale. As she embraced me on the front porch, she whispered, "Learn everything you can about James, about your biological father. I want to hear all of it when you're ready." "I will," I promised. She turned to Catherine next, the two women regarding each other with a mixture of grief and gratitude. "Thank you," Mom said simply, "for raising my daughter when I couldn't, for loving her." Catherine's eyes glistened. "And thank you for giving mine a beautiful life, despite everything." They embraced, these two mothers united by an unimaginable circumstance, and I felt a swell of emotion at the sight. Something beautiful was emerging from the ashes of Victor Palmer's cruelty, a connection that transcended conventional family boundaries. After Mom drove away, Catherine turned to me with a tentative smile. "So, would you like to see some pictures of your father? Of James?" I nodded, suddenly eager. "Yes, please. I'd like that very much." She led me to the living room, where she pulled a photo album from the bookshelf. We sat side by side on the couch as she opened it to reveal a smiling man with my eyes, my nose, my tendency to tilt my head when concentrating. "James Davison," Catherine said, her voice warm with memory. "Your biological father." I traced his face with my fingertip, drinking in the details. "He looks like me." "He does," she agreed. "Especially around the eyes. He had that same intensity when he was focusing on something important." Page by page, she introduced me to the man who had given me half my genetic material, but had never known me as his daughter. James on their wedding day, radiant with happiness. James painting the nursery in preparation for a baby, for me, his forehead smudged with yellow paint. James at his architecture firm, bent over blueprints, creating buildings that still stood in Mapleton and beyond. He was brilliant, Catherine said. Creative, thoughtful, with this ability to see spaces in 3 dimensions that I always envied. He designed our house, you know. Every detail was carefully considered. "When did he die?" I asked softly. 5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. It was quick. Only 4 months from diagnosis, too. She trailed off, pain still evident in her expression. He never knew about the switch. I wonder sometimes if he suspected, if he noticed that Emily didn't have his eyes or his talents. But if he did, he never said anything. "Tell me more about him," I encouraged. "Everything. What he loved, what annoyed him, his favorite foods, the books he read." And so she did. For the next 2 hours, Catherine shared James with me. His passion for classical music, his terrible singing voice that didn't stop him from belting out Beatles songs in the shower, his habit of leaving half-finished cups of coffee around the house, his annual tradition of building elaborate sandcastles at the beach. With each detail, the abstract concept of biological father transformed into a real person, complex and flawed and wonderful. A person whose blood ran in my veins, whose genetic material had shaped my physical appearance, my aptitudes, perhaps even some of my personality traits. I wish I could have known him, I said finally, when we reached the end of the album. Catherine's smile was sad but genuine. He would have been so proud of you, Olivia, so amazed by the woman you've become. Even though he didn't raise me, even though I grew up a Palmer. James wasn't concerned with names or bloodlines, she said firmly. He cared about character, about kindness, about making a positive difference in the world. From what I've seen, you embody all of those qualities. Her words warmed me, easing a worry I hadn't fully articulated even to myself, that somehow I had failed my biological parents by growing up in another family, with another name. The sound of movement from upstairs signaled that Emily was awake. A few minutes later, she joined us in the living room, wrapped in a fluffy robe, her hair tousled from sleep. "Morning," she mumbled, curling up in an armchair. "Or afternoon, I guess. Sorry for sleeping so late." "You needed the rest," Catherine said. "Feeling any better?" Emily nodded. "A bit." "Karen left already?" "About 2 hours ago," I confirmed. "But she's expecting you whenever you're ready to visit." Emily nodded again, her expression contemplative. "I've been thinking about that. About going to Riverdale, seeing where I might have grown up." She looked at Catherine. "Is it strange that I'm nervous? That part of me is afraid to step into that alternate life?" "Not strange at all," Catherine assured her. "It's a lot to process. If you need more time—" "No," Emily interrupted. "I want to go. I need to see it. To understand." She turned to me. "What was it like, growing up there, in the Palmer house?" I considered the question, wanting to be honest without idealizing. My childhood. "It was good, mostly. Quiet after Dad died. He was killed in a car accident when I was 4, so I barely remember him. Mom threw herself into her real estate career, so I spent a lot of time with Grandma Eleanor." I paused, the irony striking me anew. The woman who knew the truth all along. "She must have carried that burden for so long," Emily mused. "Watching you grow up, knowing you weren't really a Palmer. Watching me struggle with health issues that confused everyone. I'm still trying to reconcile my memories of her with what she did," I admitted. "She was always so loving, so present, in my life. But she kept this enormous secret, allowed this injustice to continue for decades. People are complicated," Catherine said quietly. "They can be loving and deceptive, protective and harmful, all at once. Eleanor made a terrible choice, but it seems she tried to love you as best she could within the confines of that choice." I nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. Grandma Eleanor had been complicit in Victor Palmer's scheme, had maintained the deception for decades. But she had also been the one to reveal the truth in the end, to give me the means to find my biological family, to set things right. "Were there any signs?" Emily asked suddenly. "Looking back, were there moments when you felt out of place in your family?" I thought about it, searching my memories for clues I might have missed. There were small things. I didn't have the Palmer green eyes, obviously. And I was always athletic, while Mom and Grandma weren't particularly coordinated. But those didn't seem significant, just the normal variations you'd expect in any family. I hesitated, then added, "The biggest disconnect was probably with Victor, Grandpa Victor. He always made me feel like I was being evaluated, measured against some standard I didn't understand. Now I know why." Emily's expression darkened at the mention of Victor Palmer. "I keep thinking about him watching me grow up from a distance. Knowing I was actually his biological granddaughter, but feeling—" What? Disgust? Relief that he'd cast me off? Satisfaction that his eugenic experiment had succeeded? "We'll probably never know exactly what he felt," I said gently. But I doubt it was satisfaction. From what Mom has said, he was never satisfied with anything. A miserable man making others miserable, Catherine observed. What a waste of a life. We fell silent, each lost in our own thoughts about Victor Palmer and the ripple effects of his actions across our lives. Finally, Emily stirred. I think I'll go to Riverdale in 3 days. That gives me time to wrap up a few things here. Prepare the online store for remote management. She looked at me. And it gives us a little more time together before we each explore the other side of our story. I'd like that, I said sincerely. Despite the circumstances that had brought us together, I was genuinely enjoying getting to know Emily. Her sharp wit, her resilience in the face of chronic illness, her thoughtful perspective on our shared situation, all of it intrigued me, made me eager to deepen our unusual connection. Then it's settled, Catherine said, standing. Emily goes to Riverdale on Friday. In the meantime, Olivia, would you like to see more of Mapleton? The places that would have been part of your childhood if Victor Palmer hadn't interfered. I finished for her. Yes, I'd like that very much. The next 3 days passed in a blur of discovery. Catherine showed me around Mapleton, the elementary school where I would have attended, the park where James had envisioned pushing me on the swings, the ice cream shop where the Davison family had celebrated special occasions for generations. Each location was simultaneously foreign and familiar, like places I'd visited in dreams. I could almost see an alternate version of myself growing up here, learning to ride a bike in that quiet cul-de-sac, browsing books in Catherine's store after school, helping James in his home workshop where he built furniture as a hobby. Emily accompanied us on these tours, offering commentary from her own experiences growing up in these spaces. Dad used to bring me here every Saturday morning, she'd say as we passed a cafe near the bookstore. Or, I broke my arm falling from that tree when I was 9, pointing to a massive oak in the town square. In the evenings, we gathered in Catherine's living room, sharing more stories, asking questions, gradually building a composite picture of our parallel lives. It was therapeutic, this gentle exploration of what was and what might have been. On Thursday evening, our last night together before Emily's departure for Riverdale, Catherine brought out a dusty cardboard box from the attic. I've been saving these, she said, setting it on the coffee table. They were supposed to be yours someday, Olivia. Inside were baby clothes, carefully preserved, tiny shoes bronzed as keepsakes, a crocheted blanket with baby Davison embroidered in one corner, a collection of sonogram images showing a developing fetus, me, in Catherine's womb. Oh, I breathed, lifting the blanket. It was incredibly soft, the yarn faded with age, but still beautiful. You made this? Catherine nodded. During my pregnancy. I worked on it every evening while James read aloud from whatever book he was enjoying at the time. He was convinced you could hear us, that you were absorbing the stories along with the sound of our voices. I blinked back tears, overwhelmed by this tangible evidence of how eagerly I had been awaited, how thoroughly I had been prepared for. Thank you for keeping these, I said, for saving them all these years. I could never bear to part with them, Catherine admitted. Even when Emily outgrew them, even when James suggested donating them to make space. Something made me hold on to them. Emily watched quietly as I explored the contents of the box. There was no jealousy in her expression, only a wistful curiosity. It's strange, she said finally. These were meant for you, but I'm the one who wore them, who was wrapped in that blanket, who looked out from that bassinet. The ultimate identity theft, I said, attempting to lighten the moment. And you were only hours old. She smiled, appreciating the effort. The world's youngest criminal mastermind. We laughed, and the tension eased. This was how we were learning to navigate our extraordinary situation, with honesty, with occasional humor, with a willingness to acknowledge the painful parts without being consumed by them. As the evening wound down, Emily excused herself to finish packing for her trip to Riverdale. Catherine and I remained in the living room, the box of baby mementos still open between us. "I want you to know," she said suddenly, "that I don't expect you to become a Davison overnight, or ever, if that's not what you want. You're a grown woman with an established identity. I'm not trying to reclaim the baby I lost 28 years ago." "I appreciate that," I said. "I'm still figuring out what all this means for me, for who I am and who I want to be." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Take all the time you need. There's no rush, no pressure. I'm just grateful for the chance to know you now, to be part of your life in whatever way makes sense for both of us." I reached across the box and took her hand. "Thank you for being so patient, so gracious about all of this." "Well," she said with a small smile, "it's not exactly a situation covered in parenting books. We're all finding our way together." In that moment, I felt a surge of affection for this woman who had carried me in her body, who had prepared so lovingly for my arrival, only to have me stolen away, and who now welcomed me back into her life with open arms and no expectations. The foundation of my identity had been shattered by Grandma Eleanor's deathbed revelation. But sitting here with Catherine, surrounded by evidence of a love that had waited decades to be reclaimed, I realized I wasn't left with nothing. Instead, I had been given the rare opportunity to rebuild my sense of self with full awareness, to integrate the Palmer and the Davison, the nature and the nurture, into something wholly, authentically me. It wouldn't be a simple process. There would be legal complexities, emotional landmines, moments of disorientation and doubt. But as I carefully refolded the baby blanket that should have been mine, I felt something like peace settling over me. Not the false peace of ignorance, but the hard-won tranquility that comes from facing difficult truths and choosing to move forward anyway. Tomorrow, Emily would begin her own journey of discovery in Riverdale, and I would continue mine here in Mapleton, learning about the family, the heritage, the life that had been meant for me. We were both stepping into alternate realities, exploring roads not taken. But we wouldn't be alone. We had each other now, sister friends bound by a unique shared experience. We had Catherine and Mom, two remarkable women who had each raised a daughter not biologically their own and loved her without reservation. We had the truth finally, painful as it was, and we had the future, unwritten and full of possibility. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.